Tell us about your book, so our panel knows a kind of a little bit about yourself, my friend. Tell us about your book.
I appreciate that, James. So I transitioned out of the military about 6 years ago. I had served in the Army for 35 years and commanded 25,000 soldiers in Iraq as part of the surge and largest installation in the free world. As soon as I transitioned from the military, I wrote a book about adaptive leadership. So I've been traveling the nation over the last 5 years, talking to audiences large and small. And what I realized is we're anxious people. The American public are anxious and fearful and concerned. They're worried about their own livelihood, the economy, their local security, national security. Every time they turn on the TV or read the newspaper, they get another thing to be concerned about. And they would always ask me in the QA, they'd say, well, General, how can you be less concerned and less fearful, less anxious with all the things that you did over the course of your time in the military? And the answer is my personal relationship with God. He gives me strength and courage. So I decided to write the book. The book's entitled Work Hard, Pray Hard, The Power of Faith in Action. And what I'm trying to do is give folks who are anxious or fearful a way to be less so by strengthening for God. So there's 7 chapters in the book. So if you're struggling with courage, there's a chapter entitled Commanding Courage. If you're faced with limitations, there's a chapter entitled Overcoming Limitations. And I just really hope, James, that somebody out there, one of you listeners who's struggling right now, can pick up the book, and as a result of reading and practicing some things I talk about, they'd be less fearful and concerned. And the book's not about religion. It's about spirituality and spiritual fitness.
Dan, you work with the military, with your nonprofit.
Yes, sir.
And you do a lot with all sorts of different things as far as the military goes. Rick's got a great book. I'm sure you've got some questions here for Rick about his book.
Yes, sir. First of all, thank you for your service. I'm a veteran, an Army grunt. I was not an enlisted man. I wasn't an officer. I was an enlisted man, and I did my tour. And it was except for a short stay in a military hospital, it was a great experience. I still think about those men I was in the service with all the time, and so I thank you for your wonderful service and your career as an infantry grunt, and thank you. General, thank you. General, I have a nonprofit called Songs and Stories for Soldiers. And we started 2.5 years ago on a mission given to us by the Lord to help soldiers, veterans, to deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep deprivation, and suicide. We're in 63 facilities across the United States. We've distributed over 11,000 MP3 players, which is the basis of our ministry. We have a website called songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us, and on that site, General, we have 3 million songs, 100,000 audiobooks, 30,000 old-time radio shows, and 4 additional 8-hour sleep audios that have been custom designed to help the veteran get to REM level sleep. We give the soldier an MP3 player, which has 2 novels and an additional 8-hour sleep audio. And all of it's free. The MP3 player is free. All the access to all the content on the website is free to veterans. So my compelling question to you, sir, do you have this book in an audio form?
Yeah, actually, my publisher has me doing the audio version in just a couple of weeks, so it'll be available in the mid-May time frame. And congratulations on all that important work that you're doing. It sounds exactly right.
I'm going to put you on the spot, General. When your audio recording is done, would you give it to us to give to the soldiers?
Sure, yes. The reason I wrote the book and the reason I would do an audio recording is to help people in need, to include our service members who are struggling with visible and invisible wounds. So I'd be proud to do that.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'll get from Jim for your contact information, and we don't charge the soldiers anything. In fact, all the content that we get that I told you about on the website is all given to us free on the understanding that we will never charge the soldier, the veteran, for any of the content. So I can't pay you anything for it, and I don't charge the soldiers anything. We're a couple of places you might be aware of. We have several different operations at Walter Reed and a whole bunch of operations at Brooke Army in San Antonio. So we are working with the active duty problem of post traumatic stress disorder and sleep and then suicide. Suicide's a tremendous problem, General, and for a long time the Veterans Affairs never broke out suicide rates based on sex until last fall. Male suicide rate is about, in the military, about 4 times the civilian rate, which is tremendous. But even more scary, General, is the fact that the suicide rate for female veterans is 12 times the civilian rate. 12 times. And so we're working, just got off the phone this afternoon with the VA Center here in Cape Coral, trying to build a special program to reach out to the 2.1 million female veterans that are across this country to try and help deal with what the VA says is approximately 600,000 women who have PTSD. I mean, it's a scary number, General.
In my last posting in the Army, I ran all the Army installations and all the programs on the installations to include our suicide prevention program. So nothing that you're telling me surprises me. The reason Chapter 7 exists in my book is entitled Spiritual Fitness, because I'm absolutely convinced. I had the privilege of serving in combat in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Kosovo, 3 times in Iraq. People say, well, why didn't you come back with post-traumatic stress, or why did you have some sort of problem? And the answer is my spiritual fitness, my resiliency. That's a function of my physical fitness, my emotional fitness, my supportive family, and my spiritual fitness. So we could easily partner together on something like this, because it's so important. In the military, we talk about getting left of the boom, with the boom being the explosion that causes our soldiers to be injured. In the world of post-traumatic stress and anxiety, if we can get left of that by allowing folks to develop spiritual fitness and resiliency, then we're going to solve a lot of these problems before they become problems.
Yeah, General, I want to ask you what I think is, to me, is personally is a very important question. It is, I believe, obvious to me that the Lord has a special place in your heart. But I have grave concerns, General, that many people coming into the military over the last few years do not have a relationship with any spiritual force. And so when they come into a situation or life and death or whatever, they are ill prepared because there is no one for them to go to.
Yeah, you got to know, I wasn't even baptized till I was 32. I'm 61 now, so generally half my life was without God, the other half with God. So I know the distinct difference. And what leaders are supposed to do across the military and in the civilian sector as well is be leaders technically and tactically and physically and also spiritually. So what I try to do from the time I was baptized is just share with folks my personal testimony. I didn't tell them, hey, you got to believe like me, but I wanted to be a lifestyle evangelist. Like say, hey, he's pretty calm and collected right here in the middle of the battle. Where's he getting that from? And then I could share with them where I'm getting it from. So you're exactly right. A lot of them join the military without any kind of spiritual background or any kind of spiritual fitness. And remember, my book's not about religion. I never tell people that you got to believe like this. I just tell them, here's what I believe. And as God tells us in Matthew 5:16, in the same way, let your light shine before men so they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. That's what we have to do.
I think that spiritual relationship, General, I've always characterized it to people that I talk to, General, it's an anchor.
Yes.
It's something to ground you, something that keeps you from going off the deep end. I also think that part of the suicide issue that we're dealing with the veterans is that there is a lack of anchor in and as I see these soldiers, generals, I travel all over the country to these bases that we work with, and warrior and transition units and homeless shelters, and it is amazing to me the power of music and the power of the word. We have some spiritual stuff on our network that they can tap into, but I find, General, that one of the things that I see pretty consistent of all the hospitals that I go to and homeless shelters and outpatient clinics, there are two things that are very common. One, a lot of people feel like they're alone, and because they feel like they're alone, sleep deprivation is a huge problem. Not only in the retired, but even in active duty. When I was our most recent visit at Walter Reed, when we went into the Warrior and Transition Unit, General, it was just amazing to see these men and women who were searching. I mean, I was surrounded by soldiers that had lost arms or legs or both, who were in wheelchairs, who were so appreciative that somebody gave them something. Not that we gave them anything, because lots of organizations give them something, but something to deal with their anger and their frustration and their depression in dealing with sleep deprivation. It's a major.
I ran. You know, I commanded Fort Hood, Texas, as well. You know how big that place is, 65,000 soldiers. So we focused on alternate forms of therapy to help these youngsters through difficult time. So we did Reiki and acupuncture and aromatherapy and equine therapy and dog therapy and musical therapy. I didn't care what we did as long as it worked.
Right.
Clearly, you're onto something that has been proven to work. So.
Yeah. Well, I would.
James, I got about 5 minutes before I got another.
Okay, I would like to touch base with you sometime later. So I'll turn this over to Don and IQ.
Yeah, Don and IQ, do you have some quick questions here for Rick before we have to let him go?
Well, I guess my question, my experience is the Vietnam War and the wars afterwards. And one of the things when talking to older soldiers of Korean and World War II and the Vietnam War was one of the major differences was that the rotation was by individual and not by units. And the ability to build up cohesive units and comradeship was not there in Vietnam and in subsequent wars. And it was from Vietnam or subsequent wars, but rather a feeling that there wasn't that the bonds that make up military units. Do you feel that's the case, and that the Army has gone back to the unit rotation?
You know, when I commanded the 3rd Infantry Division in combat, most of those soldiers, the 25,000 soldiers I took into combat, had been part of that division for a long time. They deployed with their unit and they redeployed with their unit because we all knew how important that was. Having said that, a lot of the replacements were individual augmentees from reserve units who came in the middle of combat and really had no bond with the other soldiers. So we were very conscious of that and always trying to improve that. I mean, my father-in-law, you know, fought in World War II from November 42 until the end of the war. He was wounded on the beaches of Normandy on the 7th of June, and he fought with the same unit the entire time he was in World War II. So we all acknowledge how important that is. And I also want to make sure, sir, I thank you for your service. We as a nation did a disservice to our Vietnam veterans by not properly recognizing when you come home. And I got to tell you, I appreciate your service. God bless you for that.
Now, IQ, before we let Rick go, do you have any questions for the lieutenant?
I just want to congratulate him. Really, there's no questions I can ask. This is beyond my comprehension, so I would not say anything which I don't understand.
I appreciate it.
Well, that is fantastic. Well, Dan,
Yes,
before we let Rick go, do you have anything for him before we let him go for today?
I just I can't wait to find an opportunity to talk with you, General. I think there's some things that we can do together, and we can help even more soldiers. And we've got a lot. My biggest concern, General, is that out of 26 million veterans, we only have about 6.8 that are in the VA, which means we've got almost 18 million veterans who are not being treated for whatever it is because they can't qualify for VA benefits. And that's a lot of people out there.
I'd be happy to. I'm deeply tied to the VA, and I'm on the board for 5 different nonprofits myself, the Gary Sinise Foundation, Operation Finally Home,
homes for our troops, heroes to heroes, and on and on. So yeah, just get my contact information from Jim, and then reach out to me. We can see what we can do together.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sorry because I got a TV interview fixing to launch, so I got.
All right.
No
get pretty
problem. No
before-
problem. We
before we get-
appreciate it, my friend.
Thank you for
that-
sharing your time with us, General.